All right. Welcome to the 6-minute stretch, challenge number 7. Today we're going to focus on the emotional bounce back factor, highlighting the value of flexibility in how we respond. Before we do that, we'd like to share a definition of flexibility, and we're going to use the model from the EQI 2.0, and it has to do with the component of stress management. So flexibility is really about our ability to adjust our emotions, our thoughts, our behaviors, our actions to the changing situations around us. And we know today we have a multitude of things that are happening. One of those things that it talks about is how do we adapt to unfamiliar situations, things that are unpredictable and they're continually changing. And that's, again, what's happened in our world. And, if we think about it, it's not going to slow down. Things are just going to continue to change, and we're going to have to be more flexible as we move forward. One of the things, Sarah, I think is very interesting for you as we've done this is a couple of years ago you had a client talk to you about flexibility, and I think they used the analogy of a rubber band. If you want to just quickly share that, because I think it's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, I always thought it was so clever because essentially she said, Sarah, as you're telling me about flexibility, I'm picturing or envisioning the concept of a rubber band because it's kind of like how much elasticity do you have in a moment of challenge or stress. So the frequency in which we're adjusting our thoughts and behaviors would mean we have a really elastic rubber band. But when we are in those moments where we really don't want to move through some of those unpredictable circumstances, we get really rigid and our rubber band gets really tight. And that actually impacts us greatly when it comes to all facets of our lives. And I thought, what a great analogy.
Yeah, I think it's very good. And, so we think about it, how would you rate your flexibility? And many times, people say, well, I'm very flexible. When we really think about it, we're probably not as flexible as we need to be. And there's some things we can do to improve that. And Sarah will share that with you in a moment. But, you'll have this in your handout, but it really asks these questions is, how have you been in responding to the recent changes that faced our country, faced you, faced the workplace, and, do you cling to your old ways? Do you not accept the new environment? I want things the way they used to be. Well, they're not going to be the way they used to be. Or do you struggle with most things, and then you ultimately do it when you have to? And then you also, have somebody that I'm able to work through these changes easily, but it's still a struggle. And that's going to happen to us sometimes, but what we need to do is say, how do we get the 4s and the 5s, where we're able to adapt when presented with new ideas, that we can get on board, and then, are we that person also that can quickly adapt and generate ideas for change, not just wait on somebody to give us those ideas, but we actually generate them. A couple of weeks ago, I was listening to the tail end of a webinar, and they were talking about the new norm, or when are we going to get back to the way things used to be as well. And 2 people said, I think it's going to be 2021, first part of the year. And one of the gentlemen on the conference said, I'll take a different approach. He said, there's not going to be anything where we go back to the way it used to be. He said, literally what's happened to us is we went to bed on March 5th, and it was 2020. We woke up on March 6th, and it was 2030. And I think we all need to think about that is it's pushed us so far forward that we have to be much more agile and much more flexible. And so as we think about that, we have our normal perspectives, and then when we have these moments where we have times of shift, and so the normal side of things is we mostly operate on a plan. It's very predictable. We're familiar with what's happening, and this is where we feel like we're in control, and that's what we want. But, with change, these are things that we really can't predict. Our sense of familiarity is gone, and our control starts to go away. At least we feel we don't have control. And so what we need to do is say, with this new change, what can I do to be better prepared to move things forward? And the good news is I have an expert on the line here with me, and her name happens to be Sarah Turner. So Sarah, why don't you help them out here?
Yeah, so essentially when it comes to a tip for growing your flexibility, what we often say is that concept of adapting at times when we need to. One exercise that we've used for years with our clients is really just resetting expectations, but looking through the lens of the things that are really unique about you, that are strong talents and skills that you already have, but use them when you need them and then times of adversity. So there are really 3 steps here. So to position you to do this well, you're going to ask yourself 3 questions. The first one, what are my prior accomplishments that show that I have actually done something that has been something that we would say is truly a moment where I've gotten success? And then you ask yourself that trailing question of what skills and talents did I use to achieve that accomplishment? Then you quickly ask yourself, okay, how can I use those skills and talents that were applicable during those prior accomplishments when I have a current challenge? So that's just a realignment of something I already know about me, but during a current time. And then the third thing you're going to do is ask yourself, how can I hold myself accountable? So if I'm going to give myself an opportunity to align my strengths in moments of challenge, tell some people about it, right? Find a way to get yourself accountable so that you can make sure that you stick to that momentum. Now, a quick example of this is that I had a client who I was coaching, and I asked her, I said, give me your top 2 accomplishments. Well, her first one came quickly. She said, I was the first to graduate college in my family. I said, great. Well, tell me what skills or talents you use to make that happen. She started laughing, and she said, well, I'm pretty stubborn, and I love to learn. And I said, excellent. So then I said, is there any way you can use that stubbornness and your love for learning the next time you have a challenging moment? And so you have the ability to give yourself a chance to reflect, look back to look forward. That's what this exercise does. So this is in the handout that you can use and give yourself a little nudge forward. Now, one quick key, so one last thought here, a final tip. One quick key that we want you to keep in mind is as you're aiming for the idea of flexibility, make sure you're looking at a relevant scorecard. Often what we do is in times of significant change, like the major adjustments we have going on today, we focus on a prior mission or a prior objective or a prior target. Well, then we start looking at our absolute growth and we say, well, we're not meeting those. Well, instead, focus on a daily mission. Try to have something that's a little bit more short term. You can create a rally cry for your team around that, and it unifies you so that you can create momentum. Then in addition, as you're tracking progress, do a good job of trying to say, hey, how can we look at the things that we are doing and look at this one day at a time? So instead of looking at, wow, where are we going to be in 3 months? Maybe you start pulling it a little closer and you gain so much control that your adaptability and your flexibility as a skill starts to grow naturally. So those are some of the tips for this week, Denny, but what do we need them to do now?
Great, Sarah, and absolutely. So our challenge continues, and what we need you to do as an individual, start with increasing your own flexibility. As Sarah said, consider resetting your expectations and lean into those strengths and maybe some short-term goals. I'd also say within there, and you may see this in the handout as well, is pick some of those things where you know that you typically dig your heels in. No matter what it is, you don't listen to people, and you start off not being flexible. Because the way we are today in the workplace and everything that's going on, we have to be able to see others' perspective. And if we're not flexible, you will never get there. And then also as a team. You know, we've said, watch the video, have a conversation, talk about where we need to be more flexible so we can be more effective as an individual, the best version of ourselves, as well as better for our teams. And so as always, we will conclude is it's go time. So let's do this. Have a great week.